Hello, I'm Jake Stahl, founder and CEO of Jake Stahl Consulting. And in my episode for the Business Growth Architect, I reveal how to get by precondition responses, how to make the other person really feel good about the conversation and about you, which leads to further conversations, and why sales is not just a math game of closing 1 out of every 50 calls. I show you how to get by that math. So make sure to check out the full episode so that you can be more confident in your conversations, get higher close rates in your sales, and be somebody people actually want to talk to.
And hello, fabulous person. Beate Gillette here. I am the host of the Business Growth Architect Show, and I want to welcome you to today's episode where we discuss how to navigate strategy and spirituality to achieve time and financial freedom. Truly successful people have learned how to master both. A clear intention and a strategy to execute that in a spiritual practice that will help them to stay in alignment and on purpose. Please enjoy the show and listen to what our guest today has to say about this very topic. And welcome back. This is your host, Beate Gillette. Welcome to the show. And we are talking today to Jake Stahl. And we are talking today about something that should be really effortless and easy and simple. And it's the art of conversation. And then yet, Jake, you say that people screw up conversation faster than they say hello, or just as fast as they say hello. So welcome to the show.
Hello, thank you for having me. It's much appreciated.
So for somebody who does not know what you do or has never heard about you, would you just give us an introduction of who you are and why you're here?
Sure, yeah, my name is Jake Stahl. I've been in training and development for 30 years, across 6 countries, 10,000 plus people. And one thing I realized after training all these people was that conversational dynamics are really just probably not where they should be. We talk with other people without really listening. And as a matter of fact, many people listen just to talk again. And it's just, it was no surprise, I guess, that the art of conversation is dying in a world where we text a lot and we email a lot. And person to person is still going to be important no matter how much AI is out there. So my specialty is conversational dynamics. I help people talk and listen better.
So when we first talked about this in our first conversation, you said that it really is the first, 30 seconds or something like that, where things already go bad. So give me like an example so we can really bring this to life for our audience. When does a conversation go bad?
Sure. And part of it is really preconditioning we have about conversation. So I'll give you a great example. My wife and I were out shopping and I walked by another gentleman and our eyes met. And I just nodded my head and I said, "Hey." And he said, "Fine, thanks. How are you?" So he was reacting to a conversation that never really took place. And to be frank with you, "How are you" is probably one of the more useless startups we have in a conversation. And it's not that it's useless with people we care about, because we genuinely do want to hear the answer. But in a person you don't know, it's become it's a gut reaction. And we have a lot of things like that, right? We say, "I love you." Somebody says, "I love you" back. We're conditioned to have these responses. And only after we acknowledge or understand what somebody said can we really react. So first 5 to 10 seconds in a conversation is where you're setting the pace and you're really setting a precedent for the rest of the conversation. So did you listen to me in the first 30 seconds? Were you really interested in what I had to say? Because I'm going to judge the rest of our conversation based on our first interaction.
So when we talk about business and this dreaded first phone call that so many people are so uncomfortable, especially when the call seems to be a sales conversation.
Right.
Or I go in a store and somebody says, "Can I help you with anything?" And I say immediately, "Just looking," because I don't want to be bothered. So tell me, how do I circumvent this automatic preconditioned response, how you talk about it?
It's interesting because it's a lot easier than you may think. So let's take that vaunted cold call that you make. If I do a little bit of research before the phone call, if I look at their business or where they're located or what they do, my first introduction on the call is when they pick up, I can say, "I am so glad you picked up. I was really looking forward to talking to you." No name, no business, Nothing. But that conditioning that that person had of the not interested, too pricey, you can't talk to my boss right now, it's all out the window because I started with something they're not used to hearing. You can do this in retail as well. You step up to somebody, hey, so glad you stopped into our store. I'll be around if you need me. This is really the passive observer role. So you've introduced yourself with not really interjecting yourself into their life, but you set a precedent. So I'm now harmless. I'm not asking you if I can get you anything. So my second pass to you to say, hey, I did you find everything you were looking for is now going to get a response because now I'm a friendly. So it's always that breaking of conditioning. What are they expecting to hear? And what can you say to throw them off enough to get them to listen to what you have to say?
So I really like this idea because it is so common that people, especially when you go to sales training or when you go to objection handling and you talk about all these things, what they're really doing is they're teaching you how to manage automated responses. I got to talk to my wife about it, got to talk to my husband about it, have to consult our dog, cat. So, why are people programmed to give these automatic responses?
Well, let's think about starting as a child. When you have two 5-year-olds talking to each other, the conversation is rapid fire and interesting, right? That's my mom. Which one is yours? I like black. What's your favorite color? Hey, that's pink. Do you like red? It's gut reaction, and the kids want to know. But somewhere along the line, we hear something so many times that we just want to have a preconditioned response. Now, if you look back at the psychologist B.F. Skinner, he said free will is an illusion. All we are is a big bag of preconditioned responses, and those responses were something that worked well in the past. And a great example for the audience is think about the last time your cell phone rang and you saw that number come up or the person's picture come up and you went, ugh, I just don't have time for this right now. Preconditioning. So conditioning is great. We need it for survival. We need to know a lion is bad, a razor is sharp, a gun can shoot. Those preconditioned responses are great. But when it starts to come into our conversation, it can pose a real problem. And this is why companies, they say we close 1 out of every 50 people. How is that acceptable? The reason it works that way is every time the phone rings, that person on the other end of the phone has a preconditioned response. My job as a trainer is to teach you how to break that response.
I find that that to me is so amazing. I have had a habit, and I've always wondered if it was a bad habit because when somebody gets on the phone, I don't even say like hello, or I just go right in and I say, "Tell me what's good and new in your world."
That's fantastic.
And then it's like, "Oh, by the way, it's B." Or, I've always felt like I kind of like barge in with the door, and now you're telling me that's a good thing
Right. It is a
because
good
I
thing.
because I throw them off a conditioned response.
Correct.
So now if I look at my business and I am now looking at how do I know if I'm a good conversationalist or not? Like, are there any telltales? It's like if every conversation, people can't wait to get me off the phone, I'm obviously sucking at it. If I feel really shitty after a conversation or somebody just hangs up on me, that's probably a telltale sign. But most people think they're amazing conversationalists. Are they?
You know what? You very well could be. It's tough for me to give a blanket statement to say we are or we aren't, but I will tell you one thing that can make you one. And that's a good indicator whether somebody wants to talk to you or not. It's something I call the 210 rule. It's making sure you interact with that other person enough that you make them feel good about talking. I'll give you a great example. When I reach out to potential prospects, like on LinkedIn or a phone call, I don't talk about me for the first 2 or 3 minutes. I want to hear about them. And I want to hear that. And I want to hear more. And when you're done, I want to hear more. And I'm genuinely interested. But here's what happens. After a couple minutes of me asking about them, inevitably, 85% of people say to me, God, all I've done is talk about me. So what do you do? Tell me about you. And at that point, their receptivity is at its highest. Beginning of the conversation, lowest. After they ask me about me, highest. So the 210 rule basically says for every 2 minutes in a conversation, make sure you're interacting or getting some sort of response from them. And after every 10 minutes, repack or unpack what was said in the previous 10 minutes. So if you and I were talking for 10 minutes, which we have been, I can say, B, so any questions so far? We've talked about a lot. Just want to get your input. By doing this, people talk about themselves. And what's our favorite topic? Ourselves, right? Me, absolutely. And if you and I talk and you feel good about yourself because I've elicited a lot from you, you attribute those good feelings to me. So the next time I call you, it's like, oh my God, it's Jake. Yeah, I'll talk to him because he wants to talk about me. So although I can't give a blanket statement as to whether in the world we're good or bad at conversations, I can tell you a guaranteed way to make it better, and that was just it.
Can we just stay a little bit longer on the 210 rule?
Yeah.
Because I think it's a really good indicator and a tangible strategy we can give our audience. So basically, it means that when I call someone, I pick up the phone to make a phone call. I am not saying, hello, my name is Beate Schlett. I'm the growth architect. I work with visionaries and thought leaders and help them, because by that time, everybody goes like, oh God, here's a sales call.
Correct.
So the first 2 minutes of my conversation with them have to be some sort of an icebreaker, like what you said earlier. "Oh, I'm so glad you picked up. I couldn't wait for talking to you. I have a couple questions. Is it okay if I ask you a couple questions?" And then dive in and begin that 210 rule. For 2 minutes, I'm asking them a question. I'm waiting until they're responding. And then after 10 minutes, I'm recapping that. Anything else to help me maybe with some openers so I don't feel so awkward when I'm actually making that phone call?
Well, let's think about this through a study that was just done not long ago in Great Britain. And the study was, what are the odds of you finding your soulmate in any given day? This was a study that was actually done. And what they found was it was 1 out of 356. So we want to hedge those odds a little bit, right? If we're going out on a date, we want to research the people and know a lot about them. It's just a matter of doing the research in the beginning. So, hey, I see you're a trucking company and I see you've got people surrounding you, but you're hugely successful. Or I see you're in a large metropolitan area. So tell me how that's going for you. Or with your trucking company, have you taken a hit from anything like Amazon? Because it looks like you're super successful. So it's just a matter of getting that icebreaker enough that you allow them to feel good about the conversation and the business that they're in.
And that, I think what you just said is really important, because after all, we're talking about conversations. You do need to know a little bit about before you call someone. I cannot begin to tell you, as the growth architect, how many construction bidding calls I get.
I never thought about that. Yeah, I'll bet you do.
Or my favorite is, now I'm on somebody's mailer and I'm getting, granite for the design of the homes that I don't do. I think that it is a fair assessment to say, if you want to do business with someone, you got to do the bare minimum. Like, at least look at their website, read their about page. And if it is all about quantity, now that's a question, Jake, for you. So I bet that when you work with companies, that they believe in the law of attrition, that we just have to make a bunch of phone calls, we just have to train our salespeople better, objection handling, yada, 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 because they believe it's a numbers game. Is it true that it is a numbers game? Or to what extent is it true that it's a numbers game?
That is an excellent question. And here's the answer I always give the company is, why for you, let's take for granted the company says we close 1 out of 50 calls we make. My question is always, why is it 1 out of 50? And the answer is always the same. It's, well, that's what we've noticed by looking at our CRM and our past call records. So then what you're telling me is you're basing future performance on past poor performance, is what you're saying. And you've turned it into a math game. Inevitably, the company gets too many salespeople that are only doing 1 in 50, and so they start to lay off salespeople. But what they don't do is say, let me listen to a phone call of yours, and let's really break it down. And none of these hokey sales lines, like, if I could show you 5 things that you could do better with our product, it's all nonsense. We don't talk like that at all. Here's the thing we need to remember, B, is that improving conversation can lead to greater sales. And when you look at the 1 out of 50 we just talked about, we don't look at anything in life like that. I don't think to myself, I have to look at 50 monitors before I buy a new one, or I have to go to 18 grocery stores before I buy a banana.
Peanut butter, yeah.
Right.
Uh-huh.
We narrow it down. We know the grocery store we like. We know what monitor works. But why people don't do that in sales, it really baffles me sometimes. Do the research, make less calls a day, make them higher quality, and watch the difference. It does work.
Isn't it more fulfilling when you have better conversations?
It is for your customer, and that's what really matters, right?
Yes. You said something that made me pay attention. You said you take control over the conversation early on. What do you mean by that?
If you ever look at neurolinguistic programming, they tell you to look for one of three things when you start a phone call. And that's, are they primarily auditory, visual, or kinesthetic? And the way that I like to take control in the conversation is to A, do my research, and then B, when I'm listening, what kind of words are they using? I see what you mean. I don't feel that. Boy, that wasn't what I heard. Three different communication preferences. I start to mirror back then. And it's not to manipulate. I was asked on a podcast, isn't this manipulative? Is having a great conversation manipulative? I'll leave it to the experts. My personal feeling is if I can have a conversation with you and we can meet on a linguistic level, and I can meet you on your home turf of your business, what you do, and why you're so successful, my sales conversation has an incredibly high percentage of being successful. If I start with, hi, how are you, and just start blowing out topics, it's going to fail, or you're going to get 1 in 50 closes.
Well, I think it also shows the lack of confidence if I have to prove myself and I just keep throwing data and facts at people. I think it oftentimes does the opposite of that
I agree.
because it makes me sound like I'm trying too hard
100%.
because I am. And we will be right back after this quick message. Have you ever wondered what the actual amount of your true earning potential is in this market? To find out what your talent is worth, take our quiz at whatsyourtalentworth.com. You will find out your actual earning potential amount by using our proprietary profit formula. Enjoy the quiz, and again, the URL is whatsyourtalentworth.com. Beate Gillette here with Jake Stahl, talking about the art of conversation, having control of conversations that you have very early on, and how to open a conversation without submitting an automatic response. You have said to me, you try to talk people to get them to buy back into you. How do I make somebody buy back into me?
This is going to sound overly simplistic, but be super interested in them. I can absolutely promise you, if you show genuine, unabashed interest in your customer and you ask them things that allow them to brag, that allow them to talk and just reveal things about themselves, they will feel good about you. And again, just to talk about something we did before, is they don't feel good about a conversation. They feel good about you because you're the one that made them feel good. And this has been proven hundreds of times over in psychological studies that people feel good about people who make them feel good about themselves. It's a simple thing, and yet I think oftentimes we're too in a rush to do that. We've got too many calls to make, too many things to do. I can't invest the time with you because what if you don't want my product? Then I wasted all that time. But the reality is, if you and I like each other and I follow up with you in 2 weeks, you're going to think, oh my God, yeah, I felt great talking to Jake. I'll pick up the phone. So I may not get you the first time, but the second time, my odds are just a little bit better than they were the first time.
This is a personal question I have. So why don't we make this real? So I have really changed my approach on this a little bit because I used to, do these first whatever strategy calls or uncovery sessions for a longer period of time. And what I found is that I felt that there was too much weighing on this one phone call or this conversation. And so now I've changed it. And so in the first conversation, only 15 minutes. But the chances of closing, let's just say anybody in 15 minutes is relatively slim in a coaching and consulting business, unless, the stars align
It's very true.
and you go in there. So what I've done now is that I say, I want to brainstorm in your business, and I ask just enough question to know if there's even another conversation warranted. And then I don't even rush it. I don't even like try to get the call booked right away. I say, let me think about this because I feel like I have responses that I want to give you, but it's not flushed out yet. Is it okay if I take a couple of days and then reach back out? Following your model, then, Jake, that's a jackpot model, then, because it shows I listen. It shows I take time to think about it, which I actually do. I call back. I am showing interest in them. So does this have the hallmarks of all the things that you talk about, or would we tweak it some?
No, it does have the hallmarks. And you brought up an interesting point about talking to them and seeing if it feels right. I think the thing we tend to forget, especially as consultants, is that we're interviewing them as much as they're interviewing us. To me, firing a client is harder than finding a new one. So to your point, I'd rather take that time. But yes, I think your model is great. Take that first phone call, build rapport, make them feel good, be genuine about it, and set up that second call to be just that much better. You're really setting up every conversation. You're setting up every minute of a conversation. The more involved you get, the more of a jackpot you're going to get in the minutes following.
So that then changes everything all the salespeople tell us. Because the salespeople tell us get on the call, increase the urgency, turn up the heat, make them feel the pain, and then rip the band-aid off, put the finger in the wound, turn it slowly, apply more pressure, help them with the financing. That feels transactional to me. But you're not a transactional guy. You are a long-term guy. So when we change this model into a real relationship, because a relationship does normally have this kind of back and forth where I ask a question, you respond, and something like that. Can you share maybe a little bit more sort of about the psychology of the going back and forth and the actual art of having a conversation? Because I will tell you that a lot of people that are texting a lot don't really understand.
You're right, they don't.
So can we give people some pointers who rather do a text or want to write bullet point emails?
Sure. So let's talk about the having a better conversation. When we go to have a conversation, here's a great tip for everybody. If you want to have a great conversation, and this is going to feel weird at first, but I want you to try it, is when you're talking to somebody, listen super careful. And every once in a while, just interject and repeat something back that they said, just in a different way. And I'll give you an example. My wife has been in banking for 25 years. And there are times I'm listening to her and she's using acronyms. And I don't want to just stop and say, what's that mean? So she'll say, so we worked on ACH today. And I'll just say, ACH? Yeah, we went down the line with this and I had to talk to the tax department. Oh, I'll bet the tax department's rough. Yeah, it really is. So when you start to repeat back little tidbits, you will be astounded at how much it just blows up the conversation. People start revealing things that you never thought they'd reveal. And it's just that simple technique. And what's amazing is I've been doing this for years, and I can count on one hand how many people have noticed that all I was doing was repeating things back to them. It's better than asking questions. I hear all the time, do your objection handling and ask deep probing questions. No way. I'll listen to a person talk about their business, and once every 2 minutes or even less than that, I'll repeat back something they just said. By the time we're done with a 1 hour conversation, I've got more notes and probably more information than they thought they would give up. And again, it's not manipulation. I'm genuinely interested in what you have to say. But my being interested spurs a cavalcade of information.
To me, this is like the most important thing of our conversation today to take away is you can't fake interest. There's a difference between you saying, so what you're saying is that if you don't increase your numbers by $100,000 by March, then you will, is different than saying, so what I'm hearing you say, if I understand this correctly, that you're generally worried about your people, that payroll's getting tight, cash flow is tight because, your vendors are not paying you enough. I think the specifics are critical. When I'm on a phone call, I'm following your outline. So, can I fake interest? Is that even possible? Or will a client or somebody on the phone smell it like a rat?
I've had this conversation with a number of my colleagues, and I think we're all in agreement that if you're good enough, you can fake interest. But I think for the most part, people are remarkably intelligent and they pick up on it. So I think you can have that 1 to 5% of people that are masters of manipulating conversation and they can fake interest really well, and nobody will notice. But I think the other 95% of the time, people are smart enough to go, this person just could care less about what I do and what I want. So that is strictly a non-scientific answer. That's just guesswork on my part.
Yeah, because I do believe that there are people that are just absolute masters at their craft and a very good salesperson. I want to say, and I've had someone on my podcast where it is literally indistinguishable for me on whether or not it is just so natural to them that it's an effortless or whether they're master manipulators. And I don't think you at that level, you probably don't even care because they're that good.
Right. Yeah, I would agree.
But for the majority of us who need to pick up the phone and get over this first hurdle, I think these tips are really important. What are you seeing as far as communication or conversation trends, if there are any in the market?
A lot of people are avoiding that first contact. So you'll look at LinkedIn or you look at texting or emails, and there's such a glut of first contacts that are a sales message. I don't know you at all. I love the ones that say, "Oh, I had one not long ago. It said I read your website and I was really impressed by this, and this." At the point that message came through, I didn't have a website. I just put my website up just within the past couple of months. So I think that the need to sell quickly or to get revenue is overwhelming the need for people to have a conversation. My rule of thumb is this: I don't sell anything within the first 3 or 4 contacts with a person on LinkedIn or email or anything, because I want to know about them and whether we're going to be a good fit or not, because maybe we won't. And my rule of thumb is unless I am giving explicit instructions on something, and if a conversation is more than 2 sentences, I call them. I don't put it on email or chat. I would much rather have the back and forth, because then I can read your body language. I can understand your intonation and your highs and lows. That tells me far more than your voice does. 80% of what we do is nonverbal communication. So if I just go by texting, what am I getting? 10% of what you really mean, and the chance of me misinterpreting is astounding.
Yes.
I tell my clients all the time, you do not write your texts or emails. The person reading it writes it in their head based on where they are that day. So if you think that you write your own emails or texts, you don't. It's an illusion, because no matter what you say in there, somebody can interpret it however they're feeling that day, however they feel about you, your company, etc. So I didn't mean to interrupt you, but it's a
No.
sage piece of advice that you gave.
I do really want to hear this. The other, and now as we're closing our podcast today, let's talk about spirituality. What role has spirituality, spiritual practice, enlightenment, meditation in your life and in your work?
Years ago, I had a near life ending experience about 10 years ago. And prior to that, I didn't have much in the way of belief, spirituality, etc. And now I think my spirituality has come to the point of, this is going to sound odd, but forgiving myself. We make a lot of mistakes in our past. We make a lot of mistakes in our day. And at the end of the day, one of the things I say to myself is, I forgive you. You did some good stuff today. You made a couple of mistakes. You're good to go. Tomorrow's another day. So I think a lot of it is self-talk and trying to think of the bigger picture. Because if I'm not well mentally, the business is not going to do well, and people are going to hear it in my voice. So the biggest thing for me has just been kind of self-forgiveness and just knowing that tomorrow is going to be another day. No matter what happens today, tomorrow is going to be another day to try again.
I really like that. I think there's a difference between radical forgiveness to others and really self-love, self-healing, and compassion for yourself. And when I first came up with understood the concept of self-compassion, I thought it was ridiculous and an absolute waste of time.
Yeah. Where do I buy the bag of crystals? And
I mean, truly. And you talk to a German about self-compassion, right? Alles ist perfekt. Everything has to be always perfect. So I love that you said that there is a good amount of just being okay with making mistakes and screwing up and doing things not perfectly because God forbid, we are all human. So, back to our topic of today, what part, and this is my last question to you, what part does honesty have in the conversation?
that is an amazing question. I think that honesty is paramount. I used to tell my kids when they were growing up, you have two things that are completely yours to control. That's your level of trust and honesty and how people view your name. And the two link together. And if either of those goes astray, it's going to take you a while to recover if you ever do. So honesty, I think, within certain political bounds is probably your best bet. Because let's face it, if we were all completely honest, it would be mayhem. But I think that honesty and trustworthiness is everything. And I was in sales for so many years before I went into training. And I think as a rule, salespeople are viewed as dishonest. And in order for us to get in the good grace of our customer, we have to surpass that. We have to jump over that hurdle. And sometimes that can be painful. But you know what? On the other side of pain and growth is a good future. So just step beyond it and you're going to get there.
I appreciate that. Thank you so much. So, Jake, for somebody who's listened to the interview and wants to learn more about how they can be a better conversationalist or wants to bring you in for their company or their team to learn how to have a conversation, where will we send them?
You would want to go to LinkedIn and look me up. I'm just there as Jake Stahl. And you can also find me at jakestahlconsulting.com.
Excellent. Well, wonderful. Well, thank you so much for being here and for
Thanks
your
for
great
having me.
advice. It was a great interview. I loved having you.
Thank you.
And that is it for us for today. Thank you so much for listening to or watching this episode of the Business Growth Architect Show. And until next time, and goodbye. So appreciate you being here. Thank you so much for listening to the entire episode. Please subscribe to the podcast, give us a 5-star review, a comment, and share this episode with one more person so that you can help us help more people. Thank you again. Until next time.